Well, good evening, everyone. Dr. Jacqueline King here, the CEO and founder of Black Women Empowered. And I know you all have been waiting and anticipating this great interview with Dr. Nikisha Hammond. You see her every Tuesday on Mental Health Moment, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we wanted to come on and give some tips and talk about some things because a lot has happened with COVID and mental health and not even just COVID, just the economy, everything is so much. But Dr. Hammond, go ahead and introduce yourself for those who don't know you, which I think that's pretty much impossible.
Yes, I'm Dr. Nikisha Hammond, host of Mental Health Moment, and every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Black Women Empowered Incorporated. I'm a psychologist, an author, a speaker, and I'm happy to be here today with you.
Well, I am so glad. I've known Dr. Hammond. I can't even tell you how many
I
years.
know it's been a long time.
It's been a long time. We've broken bread together and done some events together. And she is an amazing woman. We are just so fortunate to have her on our team. So, Dr. Hammond, quick overview. What are you some of the things that you're seeing um, that people are going through with all that's going on?
Yes, unfortunately, a lot of what I'm seeing is a lot more anxiety, especially after COVID. Understandably, we all experienced globally on some level so many disruptions, so many life changes. Some of us knew people that died from COVID or were sick from COVID. I know even in my own family, we had many family members who had COVID prior to the vaccines, which when it was really even scarier. And so there's just a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of depression. And really, as a community, we're still healing. So even though, depending on where you live, maybe they've relaxed the mask mandates, maybe they've allowed you to be out and about a little bit more, but we are still emotionally healing. That was a lot for us to be dealing with the last couple of years. So what I've really seen as a community is just trying to heal and make sense of everything that's just happened, especially over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it has been a lot, and
Hmm.
and I know that your specialty is children.
Hmm.
What are you seeing the effect on the young people?
Yeah, for the young people, it's that's the thing about kids. We sometimes we might think, well, they're just kids. Like, what do they have to be stressed about, right? But actually, it's a lot because of not only I'm not blaming social media, but because of social media, it's even harder for kids because they see so much. I think about when I was a kid back in my day, before there was social media growing up, I wasn't seeing the graphic videos and images of people being hurt, people being killed, wars, the death of the murder of George Floyd, the COVID-19 hospitalization. I wouldn't be able to see all of that, but they are witnessing that. And it is really hard as a kid or as a teenager to process all of that when when you're growing up, when you're supposed to be working on learning how to trust the world. But instead, that's where the fear comes about. That's where the anxiety comes about, the depression. Unfortunately, there's a higher rate right now of hospitalizations with youth that are trying to hurt themselves or trying to kill themselves,
Hmm.
and the depression and anxiety because of everything that has been going on. So unfortunately, I've seen the same, just a lot of mental distress trying to figure everything out, especially for our youth. It's been really, really hard for them.
Yeah, and so what about the ones who, I mean, COVID was it really hit the African American and the women, people of color really
Mhm.
hard. How, I mean, are they dealing, is it like really stressful dealing with losing, a lot of people lost cousins, mothers,
Yep.
fathers. How's that? How are they dealing with that?
Yeah, that's been even I mean, research wise, just been really even more difficult for kids that identify with different ethnic groups, um, because because of losing a primary caregiver or losing a secondary caregiver. So, like, let's say they had an aunt or uncle or grandmother that was taking care of them, or even their biological mother or father who was taking care of them, and there's hundreds of thousands of kids who lost those caregivers due to COVID. I mean, in a very short amount of time. So
Hmm.
that really takes a toll on the community. for sure dealing with that on top of your personal life, on top of all the disruptions with school going virtual, which school is not created equal when school goes virtual. We know that, right? So there was just so many factors, but it's been even more difficult, as you mentioned, yeah, for kids of various ethnic groups.
Yeah, and you know, and just you like you said, just having to be homeschooled.
Hmm.
Um, and so how are they dealing now that they're back in school? I mean, did the kids fall behind?
Oh yeah, yeah. Some of the research, unfortunately, was showing. I mean, was already an achievement gap before COVID, especially with different communities of color. But with COVID and with kids, there were kids in some communities where I mean, the schools couldn't find them. They didn't even know where they were at, much less being in attendance for virtual school. And even the kids that did attend, again, when you're sitting at home, home is a different situation than school for a lot of kids. So some kids had situations where nobody was watching if they were doing their schoolwork or their homework. Some kids had situations they weren't even turning on their computers, right? So they it was a disaster. And so right now the achievement gap is that much wider, and it would take years and years to catch up. So it has been really difficult on the education system right now, not to mention the amount of depression and anxiety, ADHD, learning issues, all the other things that are already impacting our students. Yeah, we have a lot to catch up with socially, emotionally, and academically for these kids.
So what can parents do? Before I say that, I know that it was stressful on parents too, because some parents I read, I'm not a teacher, I'm not an educator, I don't even remember this stuff. So that puts extra stress on them. Besides the fact that they have to work, what do
Yeah,
you say about that?
it was, and I could personally attest. Back in 2020, I my son at the time was 7 years old, going to virtual. He was seven. He didn't know how to type up report. 7 years old. He didn't have a laptop at home where he book, and just some of the expectations. I remember literally, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna have to basically be a stay-at-home mom for a little bit to help this kid through school, because there's no way he can just sit in front of a computer and do all this work. He's never done that before. That's not how he was learning. He's in second grade. And so and it was hard. It was very stressful, on top of, as you mentioned, a lot of people dealt with underemployment, unemployment, financial issues, sickness, dealing having to deal with the disruptions socially, like with our social support, because we couldn't see one another in person because of COVID. So there were so many factors, especially for parents, which made it even that much worse. The hardest thing, like I said, was it was really not having the support system. And then for some kids, they desperately needed the in-person services. So they might have needed also like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, all sorts of different type of therapies that for a lot of kids would be more beneficial in person, but they weren't getting any of that, right? Because everything was shut down. So it was really difficult for parents, very, very difficult. Some parents having to make a decision. Do you work, or you know, do you educate your child? Because it was so hard for them at home, especially parents with multiple children and multiple grades. And you have one computer, let's say, at your house, and you have three kids that need to attend school virtually, right? It's just, it was a really hard situation. It was really hard for parents, for sure.
Yeah, and let me just tell everyone who's just tuning in, we are with Dr. Nikisha Hammond, who is a psychologist, and she does our mental health moment. So we're talking about mental health because, of course, May is mental health awareness. And I ask that you please share the broadcast with your family, your friends, your coworkers, anybody that you know that might need this information. So, what are some of the things that you've been? I know you come on every Tuesday
Mhm.
that you've been encouraging our audience to do.
Yeah, we have talked extensively, especially since 2020. 2020 was all about, honestly, emotionally and mentally trying to get through COVID. Now we're on the other end where it's really about healing, it's really about your own wellness and having a plan, right? Because a lot of time we have a lot of plans for things. We have plans for losing weight, we have plans for making money, we have plans for, all these other things are our goals, if you will, in our lives. But when it comes to us and taking care of ourselves, our self-care goals, our wellness goals, mind, body, spirit, right? All together, a lot of times we slack in that. So we've really been talking this year about how to set those things up reasonably and giving yourself grace, really, because again, we are all in a healing process right now. Some of us, we're at different stages, and that's okay. We talk a lot about that. We're at different stages of our wellness journey, and it's okay. Some of us are like almost to the finish line with our goals, and some of us are at the starting line. And it's okay. It doesn't matter where you're at in the journey. We can't look back and judge where we're at compared to someone else. We just need to keep moving forward. Sometimes we got to take a couple steps back, but we're keeping, we're just going to move forward through it. So that's what we've really been talking about, especially this year. And making sure you're encouraging other people too. There's so many people that are hurting. So make sure you're encouraging other people too.
That's one thing about BWE, and that we do
Yes.
inspiration every day,
Yes.
all day, and we
Yes.
try to give a glimmer of hope to those who,
Mm-hmm.
it may be a post or a message, a Bible study or a prayer that can
Yes.
give them hope that it's not, it is going to end at some point,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll get through this if you hang in there.
Yeah.
So I pulled up the statistics for 2022, and it says one
Mm-hmm.
in five adults live with mental illness. Almost 1 in 25 live with a serious mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
That's deep.
Yeah, it is. And that's a thing. And that's what I mean. I promise you all, what you see on social media is a highlight reel of someone's life. You do not know what people are going through. I promise you, someone in your life, your family, your friends, they are suffering with depression or anxiety or some other mental health issue. Whether or not they disclose that is another thing. But I promise you, there are people around you, even the strongest people, you think they're the strongest people in the world. There's so many people that are hurting. I cannot tell you, I've heard thousands of stories from people, and people have admitted, many people have admitted to me that what they put on social media is false. Basically, it's a false narrative of their life because they're embarrassed to show their depression or their anxiety or whatever it is they're going through. So keep in mind, we don't know what people are going through. That's why it's so critically important that we're kind to one another, that we're reaching out, that we're helping one another. The smallest things count. And I've shared this on Mental Health Moment. I'll share this again because it's not something from a textbook, but over, I don't know, almost 2 decades, it feels like, of seeing different people in different environments all over the country. Um, the things that have literally saved people's lives are when someone reached out to them. It could have been a text message, an email, a phone call out of the blue. There have been people at the verge of taking their life. I have
Mhm.
talked to many of them, but when they received that caring text, phone call, email, whatever it was, they said to themselves, okay, wait a minute, someone does care about me. And they changed their mind from taking their life. Like that is how powerful for us as a community to be connected to one another, be kind to one another, and encouraging one another is. You don't know if you are literally saving someone's life. And I tell you over and over and over again, I've heard these stories. So I strongly encourage people to make sure we're doing that at a minimum to help other people around us.
And that brings me to a story. I actually went to a doctor recently, to
Mm-hmm.
my physician, for annual checkup, and I asked her a question, and she snapped at me, and my response was like, okay, I'm paying you. That's what I was thinking. But
Mm-hmm.
then I said, you know what? I don't know what
Mm,
she's going through. I
yep.
don't know if she's having a bad day. I don't know anything. So, I said, okay, well, I'm sorry. And I actually gave her a hug.
Oh.
Uh, but I mean, I could have just went off on her because, like I said, I'm paying you
Yeah, yeah.
and your salary. But
Uh-huh.
I really had to reevaluate it because I'm like, what? The question wasn't that big of a deal, and what
Yeah.
would make you just like go off like that? You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I'm saying this to say, the things that maybe you used to do, you might want to, or the way you used to talk to people, even
Mm,
customer service, because a lot of the customer service people are working from home, and
yeah.
I know that's hard because
Yeah.
I've done it. And when you get, there's nobody you can ask the question to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so I'm saying, like you say, um, just try to be kind.
Hmm.
Uh, to everyone you meet because that post that goes around, you have no idea what type of battle that
Hmm.
person is going through.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite quotes too. That we need to be kind to each other because you don't know what all of us are facing some type of inner battle. Now, some people are very transparent. Kudos
Right.
to them, and they put everything online. You know those people in your circle.
Yeah, I
I know
know.
I
I
have some
don't.
people in my
I
circle.
don't. I don't put anything
I
online.
mean, like 10 times a day they post, and I know every single thing that's going on in their life. Yeah, those kind of people that are that transparent, maybe on Facebook or wherever else they post,
Yeah.
but the majority of people are not, right? So we don't know what's going on every day, all day in someone's life. So just something to really keep in mind. But I agree with you. That's so true, and I'm glad you did that because you don't we just don't know what our hugs, what our again our caring messages, what that does for someone. But I promise you, it can do a lot for a lot of people.
Yeah, girl. Because look, I'm from New Jersey. We would take our earrings out. You know what I'm saying?
Don't take any earrings out.
I'm
Don't
just
take any
saying.
earrings out.
I'm
I
just
know, but let's
you know.
yeah, let's let everybody keep your earrings in. We're gonna keep our earrings in.
But so this says that 50% of chronic mental illness starts before 14 years of age. I know you can talk about that.
Yeah,
That's
yes.
deep.
And it is deep, but the thing is, because I was just reading something the other day that was talking about how, unfortunately, it hurts my heart to hear it, but we've really neglected children's mental health for so long. And I think it's just this, I mean, really like old school mentality, like where we used to think like kids, no big deal. They're not stressed out. They don't have a job. They're not working. They're just being kids. And it's like, no, no, kids are struggling too. They have depression. They really do have. There is a thing as childhood depression. I know I still get that question now, even in 2022. Like, does childhood depression really exist? I'm like, yes, it does. There are kids now. It looks different. When kids are depressed, it may not look like an adult where they're stereotypically on a couch or very sad. It may look more like anger, irritability, not want to do their homework, snapping off, getting mad at parents, that sort of thing. It can look more like that. But kids absolutely have depression. They have anxiety, ADHD, learning issues, a whole lot of trauma, a whole lot of things that they are going through too. And like you mentioned, the vast majority of these mental health issues that we see in adulthood start in childhood, which is one of the reasons why when I initially got into the field, I was so excited about working with children and teens because a lot of the statistics show better prognosis if they can get help earlier. So let's not wait to help our kids. If we help them when they're 6, 7, 8, 12, 14, they don't have to be in their 30s and 40s and 50s still dealing with things that happen to them necessarily as an adult, as a kid, right? Because we're intervening earlier. So that's why it's important for us to take children's mental health seriously, so that we can make sure that we're not only helping them in their childhood, but we're helping them to be better adults and to be healthier and better functioning adults. Because I hope that's the goal at the end of the day, right? So we just need to make sure we take care of them early.
So, Dr. Hammond, what are some of the signs that parents should be looking for?
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot, but some of the major signs, especially for kids, when you're like, I don't know, like is something going on, is looking at how they're eating, how they're sleeping, their personality. If you're like, they're like, you can just there's a lot of parent or caregiver instinct, right? When we're like, I don't know, something seems very off. they're not doing as well in school, they're way more irritable than they used to be, or they're saying, I want to hurt myself. Please, please, I beg you, take that seriously. There are some kids that will say things like that to get attention, but there are a higher, much higher percentage of kids that when they say that, they do mean that. And they are really having those thoughts of wanting to hurt themselves. So those are some of the warning signs. And the best thing to think about is, well, there's a lot of ways to help kids, but if there's a lot of questions, a lot of common questions that I get is, when do you know to take your child to a mental health professional? I would definitely say if things have been going on for a couple of weeks, you're not seeing any changes, and whatever it is that you're seeing, the depression or anxiety, attention issues, behavior issues, take them to a mental health professional, because that mental health professional can tell you what is going on with them. Please don't Google, please don't play Dr. Google. Google will tell you all sorts of things and have you down a whole bunch of rabbit holes, a whole lot of misinformation. So take them to a mental health professional and they can tell you, okay, this is what's happening with them, this is what's not happening with them, and here's your next steps. They may or may not even need therapy, but at least you know what is going on with them and how you can best help them as a parent or caregiver.
Dr. Paula Perez said, and something that she said, bedwetting and
Mm-hmm.
isolation. Is that?
Yeah. Yep. That's another sign for some kids. There's a lot of factors with bedwetting, but some kids have a hereditary issue or whatnot. With bedwetting, I always recommend going to the pediatrician with that, because there are medical causes sometimes of bedwetting, but then if medically they are okay, then sometimes mental distress can cause it as well. But some kids, I've met a lot of kids that have some hereditary issues, medical issues that's causing that. So that's something definitely to tease out to see if there's a medical component. And if not, then you need to think about the mental health side and how you can, that can be treated in therapy as well.
Can it be generational?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of kids. I've seen a lot of kids that they're maybe 8, 9 years old, like much older. They're still bedwetting. There's a hereditary thing. So their dad used to bedwet that late. Their grandfather used to bedwet that late. So there's, like a medical genetic component. So yeah, I've seen that actually.
Wow. So
Something.
with and I like, a lot of times I like to pinpoint the African American family because a lot of, and I talked about this yesterday in my commentary for Mother's Day. A lot of mothers are working 2 and 3 jobs,
Hmm.
and they may miss the signs. They may not even pick up on it.
Hmm.
What do you say to them?
Yeah, and it is hard. It really is hard. I say the goal should be, and I get it, sometimes it's not going to be a family member helping this child, and that's okay. But the goal should be to find at least one person for this child to help them, whether it's a mentor. I personally love Big Brothers, Big Sisters, for example. They work with a lot of youth where parents have 2, 3, 4 jobs. They're really super busy. So they're like, okay, I am more stable for the time being because mom or dad or whomever else is going through a lot, right? So I'm the stable person, which is fine, right? They're the mentor. They're taking them out to different activities and things like that, kind of keeping an eye on them mentally to see how things are going, emotionally, how they're doing. Or it could be someone at your place of worship. It could be someone else in the family. It could be a friend, but someone in that child's life needs to know what is going on with them. If you're too busy, you're working too much, someone else, then more or less, or not even instead, but can be supplementing, right? That support is really, really critical for this child to have. So that is something I always recommend for like super busy parents. I've had families that I work with that have gotten a big brother or big sister, again, from that program or another mentorship or place of worship, like I mentioned, but making sure that child has someone, at least one person, positive role model in their life is really key.
One of the things that I will say, Bishop Whitaker on our team, he brought in a mental health professional on a Sunday morning. They didn't even have service. Would you encourage the churches to consider doing that?
I would love it. I would love it. And I know there's very mixed views. I see someone writing in the comments as well. I know I know there's very mixed views about mental health professionals and churches. Well, as a Christian myself and a mental health professional and the greater mental health community, on behalf of everyone, I will say that you can have both. I don't know of anyone, I will speak for the circle of mental health professionals I know that have ever had a Christian or someone of a different religious background come into their office and try to dissuade them from their religious beliefs. It just doesn't, that's not the purpose at all. If anything, most really good mental health professionals, it's the opposite. We will say, hey, what are your spiritual beliefs? So you can be whatever religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, whatnot, and most mental health professionals will incorporate that into the care because that's the way to best serve you and for you to your family or whomever the child to get better. So I yes, really 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 hope that we move towards more churches to understand we can be an ally as mental health professionals. We're not trying to take away any religious beliefs. That's just not the role. We're scientists. We're not taking away from saying you can't, there's this belief you can't love Jesus and, be in therapy, which is completely not true. And there's also a lot of therapists that are Christian based or whatever other religion based specifically that do specific counseling. But the thing to really remember, and again, I've had plenty of pastors that have called me over time to be like, Dr. Hammond, I need some assistance, like a clinical service for this mental health issue because this is beyond pastoral counseling, right? There's a difference between coaching, how, where your life should be, and clinical care for clinical
Mm-hmm.
depression or anxiety, right? There's levels, there's different aspects to it. So yes, to answer your question, the long answer to your question, I absolutely think that churches, mental health professionals, we need to collaborate in order to really move people forward. If we're trying to help people get better, which I think is the goal in both cases, and offer hope and solutions, we absolutely should be collaborating.
And most people who are um, going to church, they really believe in their pastors, and if
Mm-hmm.
the pastors are committed to helping them, then in most cases they're going to follow. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen, which I so appreciate, for all the pastors that I have seen online and whatnot that have been open about them going to therapy too. Like we are all human beings. I know, I get it. We see, huge pastor or whatnot, and you're on a pedestal, and it's like you're not human, which you are. We're all human, and there's this weird expectation that because you're God loving and you're serving God, that you're not going to have any issues or problems, which is not true
Mm-hmm.
at all, right? So I appreciate pastors that have been open enough to say, hey, I have been to therapy too. And here's how my life has changed. They're still a pastor, they're still loving God, serving God, but also I went to therapy for some challenges I was experiencing in my life. That's okay. That's allowed. That's okay.
Absolutely. Please share the broadcast. So, what is chronic mental illness? And it says 75% of chronic mental illness starts by the age of 24.
Yeah, so there's different levels when it comes to mental health, but the real chronic issues, there are people that, and it's the at least or the lower percentage of people, but they will chronically have depression, meaning there's some kids that start having depression and it goes into their teen years, adult years, later adult years, and it is pretty chronic and consistent. And then there's something called, that's just one example, but there's something also called severe mental health, which unfortunately is what I think society always thinks of when we think of mental health, which is like a schizophrenia, having
Mm-hmm.
hallucinations, having
Mm-hmm.
delusions. But the vast majority of people do not have severe mental health issues. It's more of the millions and millions of people that have depression, anxiety, which can be mild or moderate or severe.
Wow. Excuse me. It says just over 10 million people over the age of 18 have more than one addiction or mental health disorder.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole nother piece. And unfortunately, when it comes to addictions, they tend to go hand in hand. It depends on the person. So for some people, let's say there's addiction to alcohol or drugs. Generally, what I've seen is the depression or anxiety or whatever the issues are. It could be something traumatic that's happened, a loss of a loved one, loss of a job, or whatever situation happened, which leads to the drug, alcohol abuse, for example, and then goes back into the depression and anxiety. So it's a vicious cycle. And for some people, it's the opposite, where the substance abuse starts first and then starts leading to the depression and anxiety. But it can be really impactful. Addiction is a very uh, it's really hard because it can really strongly impact someone's life. I mean, unfortunately, I've heard stories where people have had really high potential, but because of strong addiction, let's say the alcohol and drugs, they have not been able to work successfully. It has ruined many different relationships. It's ruined friendships, right? So it just takes um, it can be a very difficult road. And again, there's different levels to addiction too, but we're talking about severe. So
Wow. All right. So now we're going to go to COVID and mental health statistics. Um, it says 73% or nearly 3 in 4 healthcare producers feel that their family's life is at risk of their job during the pandemic. That their family's life is at risk because of their job, during the pandemic. So remember how they were like working like triple double shifts? And I mean, I think, well, the pandemic is not over. People are
hmm
still dying, and
hmm
the healthcare providers are still maxed. So what do you say to them?
yeah, depending on what community you're in, there's been a different level of support for healthcare, the medical healthcare providers, the first responders, the even I mean grocery store employees, because if you remember, they were basically front line. Like during the
Yes.
true 2020 of COVID, it was dangerous to work at a grocery store. I mean, you're around a lot of people, right? So that has really taken a toll as well. And even teachers going back into the school space. It's been so it's been very stressful. And again, like I mentioned, I know different parts of the country have different levels of support, but we absolutely need to understand that again, all of us have been impacted by COVID, all of us on some level. If you are in that type of profession, it has been even more difficult and even more stressful. There is an extra layer of stress and angst, if you will, because of those situations that you were placed in, or maybe a family member was placed in. But what was so hard, and I remember reading those stories too, just like how you mentioned, was during 2020, for example, just hearing the stories of how people were terrified to go into work, but the option was, okay, are you going to be terrified, fearful, and go to work, or not go to work, not have a job, and now you don't have a place to live, which also happened to a lot of people, right? People were
Hmm.
evicted, and I mean,
Yeah.
it's so hard. It's really hard. It's been really, really hard.
Wow. This is, yeah. Did you get to see the documentary that Oprah did?
I don't think so. What was it about?
Yeah, no, it's about COVID and healthcare
Oh,
for
wow.
Black and Brown people. I would suggest that everyone look at that. It was, I mean, it was just a lot. But okay, so 64% of all people indicated feeling anxious in general because of the pandemic. I mean, that was hard not to do when they're predicting a million, and I think they've hit a million. A million people would die. Remember
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. Yeah.
beginning, because I couldn't even fathom when they first were saying it. We were like, "Oh, they." I'm for me. I was like, "Okay, I know they're exaggerating." Did you feel
hmm
like that?
Yeah. Yeah. In the beginning, we're all like, oh, no, it's fine. Yeah. No, it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. I mean, like, all of us were anxious because I remember even there were so many parts to think about. So you think about, well, you're anxious for your life. Obviously, you think about now you can't leave your house when we were all on quarantine. Now you're trying to get, I remember like even at my office, As a mental health practice, I'm trying to wipe things down. I couldn't get any Lysol. Like, it sounds like
Right.
I
Wait a
I
minute.
kid you not.
Lysol, toilet
Yeah, you
paper.
could, right. You couldn't get Lysol, paper towel, like supplies are out. It was a mess. It was really a mess. So yeah, so that led to anxiety. Not to mention, I don't even remember how high the unemployment rate went in the U.S. It was like through the roof. I mean, that leads to more anxiety. You have kids, again, we talked about already, who are out of school, trying to be in school, not really in school, attending virtually. I mean, it was such, like, our worlds got turned upside down. So that's something I actually we talked about on mental health moment, is the anxiety that you are feeling. Everyone is feeling. It's on different levels, but like, you're not alone. Especially during COVID, you were not alone if you felt anxious during that time, or if you still do. Now, there's a difference between feeling anxious about something that everyone's anxious about, but having the anxiety to the point where it is truly affecting your functioning. Like, there are people right now, unfortunately, that are afraid to leave their house, that are afraid to go to work, that are afraid to, do certain things, or maybe they're afraid of germs. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that anxiety manifests. So you have to make sure you're taking care of you and your loved ones, so it doesn't get to the point where it's the severe level of anxiety that's really impacting the way you function, because that's a whole nother type of anxiety. But yeah, we all had anxiety. There was a lot to be anxious about, and at one time.
Yeah. And it still is. I mean, because
Yeah.
if you go to a lot of the restaurants, I don't know, I'm pretty sure in Florida too, people are not going back to work. You
Yeah.
you're in long lines, and what kind of stress do you think that that's playing on the business owner?
Oh, it is terrible right now for hiring. I know, even in our mental health practice, I know many other small businesses, especially in big businesses too. Everywhere, it has been so difficult to hire. All the time I'm on the road, mental health moment, people that watch, I'm constantly on the road, and I go to these hotels which have little, cafes or whatnot, and they're closed. Like, there's like, sorry, there's no food here because we don't have anybody to work. And I'm like, wait, what? Right. So it's just, all over. You see the impact, which impacts those families, right, who are not able to, for whatever reason, go to work. It impacts us when we're trying to get different services. So it has been really difficult, and I think they call it the great resignation
Mm-hmm.
right now, because of how, just, which also causes more mental health distress for all of us on some levels. So it's a lot to sort through. That's why I always tell people, we are still mentally and emotionally and socially dealing with all of this. So take care of yourself. Make sure you give yourself grace during this time, because it really is a lot for our brains to process. Our brains are not designed to process this amount of information all at one time, everything that we've been through the last couple of years. So take care of yourself.
And like I always say, continue, if you're a believer, continue to pray. Pray for
Hmm.
other, pray for yourselves, pray
Yes,
for your coworkers, because I mean, I know that prayer changes things,
it
and
does.
I'm big on prayer. So, but
Hmm.
so in closing, what kind of advice would you give our audience as far as you know, taking care of themselves? I know you gave some tips, but do you have any more?
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm just kidding. I was thinking to myself, I was like, I got 3 more hours worth of tips, but I know you said closing. I know you said closing up. All right, so I'm gonna give you quick tips. So one of the tips that I love about taking care of yourself is, first of all, do what works for you. I always say that. I'm gonna keep saying that to people, because when you look to the right and look to your left, and people are doing different things, and they're on social media now because self-care is a buzzword, and you may be like, I don't want to do that. I don't have time. I don't have money. I don't feel like doing that. Please don't. But do what works for you, number one. Number two, which is something I practice often because I love it so much, with mindfulness, is, if you know your day is just going to be ridiculously busy, the things that you are already doing in your day, washing your face, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, washing dishes, whatever it is, in those times, make a conscious effort to be in the present moment. And I know it's hard because we always want to be thinking about what we need to do tomorrow, what we need to do today, what happened yesterday. That's just naturally how our brains operate. But when you take the time when you're brushing your teeth for those 1 or 2 minutes to really be in the present moment, it is the most peaceful thing you can do for your sanity. So when you do that a couple times a day, it might only be 5 minutes that you gave yourself, but that counts too, because your brain had an opportunity to reset, even if it was a short amount of time, and recharge. And then as you get more time, right? We all have different crazy schedules, but as you get more time, you can start to operate. Maybe you give yourself 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, or however much time that you need. But starting small counts too. You know, a lot of times we think when we think of self-care, we think it has to be some magical vacation and it has to be something that costs a lot of money or it has to be something that takes a lot of time. But even those couple minutes a day, you just have to train your brain to do that. Is can be really, really impactful to you. So I always say start with that at a minimum, but make sure you make a commitment to taking care of yourself.
And what are some of the things that they can do to de-stress?
Ooh, a lot of things. um, so de-stress really, my one of my favorite things to de-stress is spending time in nature. I know I'm a little spoiled in Florida, so it's like summer almost all year round. So you might not want to do this in the snow, or maybe you do. But spending time in nature, whether you are taking a walk, whether you're appreciating a sunset, a sunrise, if you're a morning person, whether you're appreciating whatever part, wherever you live. So if it's the beach, if it's a lake, if it's a mountain, or whatever scenery you have around you, to be in that calmer space. I mean, there's plenty of articles, actually, I'm not making it up, but there's plenty of articles of how nature has healing properties for us. And for those of us who are spiritual, I know for me, that's my time with part of my time with God too, is just being in nature, talking to God, praying, that sort of thing. If again, that's your spiritual belief or not, that's okay too. But just making time to do that, to de-stress, is really important, because a lot of times, sometimes you don't even know how stressed out you are. And this happened to me, I think like a week or two ago. And when you finally get the time to just like, take it down a couple notches, you're like, man, my body was so tense and so hype, right? But you just can just relax and work on de-stressing. So that's one of my favorite tips. I have many, but that's one of my favorite tips
Some of
I'd recommend.
the tips, and we thank everyone that's typing. We can't get them all,
Mm.
but someone said journaling
Hmm.
and deep breathing.
Yes, yes. Deep breathing, also my favorite as well, because it takes a couple. I mean, it could be a couple minutes a day, and it really physically it does something to you too, and mentally and emotionally. But physically, like just to take those cleansing breaths, take your heart rate down, work on your blood pressure. I'm not saying it's curing anything, but it really can help to regulate your body. So it has physical and mental health benefits for sure.
And what about exercise?
I love exercise. I love exercise. But again, I say do what works for you. I try to exercise multiple times a week. I exercise a little bit more hardcore just because I like that sort of thing. But you do what works for you. So if it's running, if you're like Dr. Hammond, I would never run, I hate running. Maybe it's walking, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's stretching. Some form of movement, though, is really important. There's a gazillion research articles that shows how exercise can help fight off depression. Again, not a cure, but it can really help with depression. I mean, there's all sorts of things that exercise does physically to your body. Obviously, it helps you cardiovascularly, depending what type of exercise, and physically as well. But it has a lot of mental health benefits to get yourself moving in some type of way.
Mm. I know someone says they enjoy living in the Bahamas. Don't even, I'm going to tell you, sister, don't even go there because I love the Bahamas. I
Yeah, we all
haven't
need a
been,
trip there.
I
We're
haven't
coming to
been to
visit you.
girl, I'm going to New Jersey and the air flight is ridiculous. I mean, it's like off the chain right now.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Dr. Hammond, you have been amazing as always. I hope that you all will take the time to share. We're actually broadcasting right now on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and 5 Facebook pages. So you could go to any one of our pages and get the replay, and you can share it on all those platforms. You can copy the URL from YouTube, which is really easy to do. But I hope that you will take this serious and share this information. We do this because we love you,
Yes.
and we want to be a resource. Um, Dr. Hammond, I love you, and I thank God for you, and
You
all of
too.
our listeners. I say I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. Until the next time, which I don't know when it's going to be, uh, I'll be back with somebody. Dr. Hammond, thank you so much, and everyone have a blessed evening.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. God bless.
Bye, everyone.